All right. So, Mike Gorman, you are the principal architect at Chorus.ai, which describes himself as the number one conversation intelligence platform to drive team performance, build stronger relationships, and acquire unbiased market intelligence. And of course, I know you from when we worked at Uptake together, and you were the chief architect over there. So that's formalities. What's going on with you? What's going on these days?
Well, I left Uptake in April, like the end of April, and then I joined Chorus shortly thereafter. So I don't know what your recording will be used for or whose hands it may be in, but I didn't leave by choice at Uptake. And it was a surprise, and it was really surreal because I've been working now. My first job was with the NSA as a co-op, which was pretty cool. And so if we go back to 1991, I've been working for 28 or 29 years. And every place I've ever been, I've been the top technologist, and the last person, that, like, if you could only afford to have one person on staff, it would be me. So anyway, so that was it was quite the shock, blindsided, and really after all I'd achieved there, because when I joined, they had a data service and a recording service, and by the time I left, there was I think a total of 8 different microservices and I had personally created 5 of them, like top to bottom, from scratch, 100% of the code. It had a team that had taken over ownership of that and was moving on to the next thing. And just really, the other thing is, everywhere I've been, you could really, every company, in my opinion, you could delineate it from before Mike and after Mike. I've never not had a significant impact, and where I made a difference. The company would not be the same without me. And so I believe that was the case at Uptake as well, where they were when I started versus where they were in March of this year, to the point where I felt like, and others that I worked with felt like, we kind of accomplished what we set off to do, which is this completely metadata driven platform that you can use to build applications that are just pure metadata, just describing them. And that is not easy. And if I hadn't done that a few times before I got to Uptake, it didn't all just come out of my head. It was, that's what 28 to 29 years buys you. And that's why, experience is important, because I can look at a problem and be like, okay, I recognize that, been there, done that, seen it, know how to solve it. I'm still learning. I'd never heard of Scala when I joined Uptake. Still don't know that was the right decision, but that ship had sailed, so I embraced it. And and I learned a little bit about AI and sensors and high velocity readings. And so anyway, so it was a surprise, because I felt like I had another significant impact on the company, but I think they just had trouble figuring out how to monetize that platform. Like, they figured out how to do one-offs and snowflakes and high code, hand code, but how to then generalize that so that they can just turn the crank on the platform and sell 1,000. It's just never happened. And there's probably, a 1,000 reasons why, but anyway, so that was just a real shock to me professionally. I've never been in that situation before.
Yeah.
And so then I was, looking for, like, okay, well, a new chapter. And I found that chapter here at Chorus. There was, I had a connection of, they had just brought on board a new VP of engineering. It happened to be the same VP of engineering that I brought on board back in 2008 or so when I worked at Rivermine. And our VP of engineering left. I temporarily filled that role, and then we recruited this guy. And 12 years later, he 2 or 3 jobs later in 12 years, and he found himself as the new VP here at Chorus. And so after I was back on the market, I put out feelers to my network, and he was one that was like, well, as it so happens, I'm just starting to get my bearings here, and one thing led to another, and so I joined. I did some contract consulting work with Chorus for a couple of months, and then I joined in earnest as a full-time employee at the beginning of June. So that's the journey that I am on. That's what brought me here today.
Yeah, I didn't know that you were let go from Uptake, and I was there for, I want to say 6 or 7 months with you. So going back
right
to what I remember is I was a part of the application studio team, and we were building essentially our own backend using Node, using JavaScript. And we kind of had the responsibility of the entire application side. So
right.
keeping in mind that I was, and still in some ways, a very junior developer. So pretty much I was doing whatever the hell people told me to do.
Right.
But I do remember when you jumped in and you built this service, I think it was the application service, that all of a sudden we had a middleman in between the generic database backend and the UIs that we were creating. And I remember when you went into Confluence and you specified this is what a module is, this is what a page is, and you created this, this huge plan. I also remember some of the skepticism, I think around my team and some other teams of like, whoa, this guy jumped in and, all of a sudden this thing came out of nowhere. Like, one, is it going to happen? 2, like, does anyone understand it? From my perspective, again, I saw you on the Slack channels answering anybody's questions, anybody and everybody's questions. And then you also built it. You built it with your own hands in Scala, which was the language of choice of some of the other backend developers. And I remember it was only, I think, a couple months before I left that we were really able to use it. But you did kind of what you said it would do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've kept in touch with some of my colleagues back at Uptake, and I remember seeing later versions of the App Studio, I guess, software, the configurable software, and some of the rendered apps, and it looked like it was farther along, than where it was at. So from my perspective as a junior programmer that was on the team, I thought, hey, you came in and you did what you said you were going to do. And you also made our lives easier, because I remember how freaking complicated it was to specify a page in metadata, to control the different versions, to adapt and build on top of it. And so from my perspective, you kind of saw a problem, and you took some ownership to take that problem away from the UI teams, and built it yourself. So that's what I saw.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good summary. There's always resistance. One thing that's a constant is there's all kinds of developers, and I don't know if you. I started writing these blog posts. I think CJ had started it, or Dan Collins, and and I wrote a blog post about there's different courses for different courses. I don't know if you remember that one. And have you ever heard that phrase?
No. Wait, different courses for different horses, you said?
Different horses for different courses.
Oh, okay.
The first time I heard it, I was a young whippersnapper about your age, and my boss said it, and I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, in horse racing, there's different kinds of tracks, and some are muddy, and some are narrow, some are wide, some are hard clay, and some are grassy, and different horses perform better on different tracks. For whatever reason, they're just like, this horse loves this track. It just does well, and it just runs faster on this track and this other track. And so there's this phrase that basically just is a way of saying that everybody's got their own strengths and weaknesses. And I felt like there's often a culture where there's a tendency to not accept people for the horse that they are, and that they recognize that they have this strength, and sort of put up with their weakness, and or understand like, okay, this guy, he's not the best communicator, but he writes beautiful code, or he's not the best developer, but he really can envision the whole thing, or this guy writes great code, but he doesn't document it, or it's a crap, like, whatever. And so, but everybody's bringing something to the table, and there had a lot of criticism about, like, I'm not writing unit tests, and I'm working on that and getting better. But like, when I started, we didn't know, it was just like, make it work. And this unit testing culture came along sort of after, at least in my little neck of the woods. And so that's and so I'm trying to be a good citizen. I'm trying to improve myself so that I basically, yes, they're good. My weakness is like, I want to see it work. I want to get this thing out. I want to compete. I want to have a button that the competition doesn't have, and we've got a button and they don't have a button. And like, I don't care if, it doesn't have a unit test. Like, if there's somebody said, you show me some code that doesn't have any bugs, and I'll show you some code that should have shipped a long time ago. And so that's kind of like, we can argue, code coverage. If you write a unit test, well, was it a good unit test? Well, let's look at the code coverage. And so you can spend all your time trying to get like, hey, I'm a perfect programmer, and I did everything the right way, and there's a flow chart, and I've got a unit test, and it's 100% code coverage. And then the lights go out because you didn't pay the power bill, because your company's losing money, and now they're locking the doors, and you're out of business.
Uh-huh.
So, and maybe some of that comes with age, but we will go out of business if we don't ship. And so I'm more interested in shipping software and competing, but I've got to coexist with other developers. I need to earn their respect, and I can't run roughshod over them. And so I try to, like I said, be a good citizen. I also want to set a good example. One thing that is also common is developers do not like to be told what to do. And that was so true at Uptake. And what I find is it depends on how you staffed. Did you ramp, did every person you hire, did you hire nothing but rock stars and nothing but PhDs and nothing but, the top of, like, if you did, and I I don't know if I ever shared my presentation with you, and I was right up out of the front, up front and out of the gate with this presentation I gave, which is kind of what part of my interview is called Software to Build Software, which just talks about building platforms that are metadata driven. And I gave this analogy of the Bugatti Veyron, this car that's an awesome car, and there's craftsmen, highly paid, highly skilled craftsmen. But so if Bugatti hires me to say, we've had this success with this Veyron, we want to industrialize this and turn it into, create an assembly line and start cranking these things out, I'd be like, okay, I know how to do that, but you know, you have to staff that assembly line with people that'll be satisfied doing that work.
Yeah.
Glad to have the job. And that Bugatti craftsman that is, you know, handcrafts the fender and the shape, and he's not going to be satisfied turning the crank. So you have to know the organization. And so if at Uptake, it was a lot of you know, highly talented craftsmen who, in their for you know, for natural and normal and expected reasons, would like have their own ideas about how to do something. Well, you know, it's not like this is right and this is wrong. It's just like we can't all be doing whatever we want to do and doing it differently. There needs to be one cook and one direction that we all go, and that may be incompatible with how you staffed. If you ramped up in a project based, you know. So anyway, so in some companies I've been a part of, I would say I've achieved greater degrees of success because of how they were staffed. And I came in and everybody was like, we are so glad you're here. We have no clue what we're doing. Please lead us. And you know, and it was just great. And
Yep.
then another place, and IBM was not staffed like that. You know, if you work for IBM, you know, you're a scientist. You know, you probably went there because you're top notch. You're also maybe older at IBM, and so there was a lot of resistance there. So it's, you know, my passion is like, I want to build a hammer that's like the best hammer you've ever used, and I want to delight you as my colleague with this hammer that I've created. I'm interested to know how I can make the hammer better. And the old hammer you used to use, you could only hit one nail at a time, but with mine, you can hit 10 at a time, you know. And that gives me the greatest satisfaction, is to create a tool that equips someone else to do their job in such a way that it delights them and that they love their job. And you know, what would be more gratifying? It's like a cook. What does he want? He wants to create something that he serves you, and you're like, this is the best thing I've ever put in my mouth. Are you sure you did this by yourself? You know, and you only used 3 ingredients. I mean, so to me, it's like, why? I think everyone should be driven that way. But so that's been my passion my whole life.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons I've been successful is because I am one of you. I am a developer. I'm in there, like, I'm creating this for myself, right? So the first thing I have to do is just figure out how to do something without any tools. And then once I figure out how to do that, I'm like, now which parts of this is just nonsense and repetitive and much more complicated than it needs to be? What is the part that's really unique, where that actually made any difference? Because the rest of this stuff is like, I don't want to worry about that. Another good example that I often use is, like, in my house, I can focus on my job because I'm not worrying about, like, I didn't have to build the house. And actually we did have this house built, but I just said, I want a bathroom here, here, and here. And I didn't have to worry about the plumbing. And today I can turn the faucet on and the water just comes out. I don't know how it got there. I don't want to know how, because I got to focus on my job. So if I have to worry about all this other stuff, and so that's, again, so when I think of my colleagues who are on the front line or in the trench, and they're the ones that are cranking out features and functions, what can I do to eliminate all the noise, all the stuff that team should not have to worry about, how to host this and Docker and authentication, and like, man, just like, here's the identity of the user, and press this button and it'll deploy, you know. So anyway, that's my mindset, is how to simplify things that should be simple.
Yeah, I'm curious if you feel like you achieved enough of that at Uptake, despite the pushback. Do you feel like you are still able to complete your mission or get far enough along in it?
Absolutely, I absolutely do. The 5 microservices were working nicely together. I don't know what existed before you left, but you know, we had a trigger service, and the trigger service, you could say, I want to know anytime something happens, like a certain record. I want to know anytime this field of this asset changes from X to Y, and then it'd say, well, what do you want us to do when that happens? And then I could say, well, I want to call this API over here, and then raise an event and send an email, and so and then I want to upload something to the file service. So we had the trigger service, the notification service, the app service, the file service, and I think there may be one more that I'm missing. But it was the big plan was coming together. But yeah, I think that like for us to by the time I left, I felt like we could move faster than product management could dream up what they needed. And that is almost never the case. In almost every place I've ever been, what product management wants is like this stack of things that they wish they could have, and here's our capacity. Mm-hmm. And now we were at the point where, like, to make a new API that powers some new function was just, you know, just the minimal amount of work to describe the contract because of the infrastructure and the frameworks that were in place. So absolutely, and like I said, I'm kind of like my first customer. I will, and that's why I coded those services myself, is because I don't want to turn anything over to anybody until I get it to where I'm satisfied with it. Like, okay, I've got the trail blazed. I've got, you know, the path has been cleared. At this point, for anything that somebody needs that's new or a change, it should just be like, just follow the trail. And like, I don't need to be involved in this anymore because, you know, I've either eliminated or abstracted all the peripheral concerns. All you need to do is just follow the recipe. And so I'm pretty satisfied with where I got before I left Uptake.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know, because I've worked with developers that are closer to your mindset, where they're thinking about the what ifs, not just, hey, I was told to do this, how do I implement it? They think about, what are all the things that I could be asked to do, and what can I create something that will make it easier to do that, while I'm also at the same time building, you know, what the hell I'm supposed to do. I'm curious where that came in for you. Like, at what stage in your career did you start to think about the what ifs?
Yeah, that is actually something that I can remember talking to Dan Lippold and the team within the, I don't know if it's the same day or the few weeks prior, but that it's a talent, and it's an art, and the talent and the art is to be presented with a problem and to think deeply about it and to see it as a very specific case of a more generalized problem. And I don't know if that can be taught. I don't know how I do some of the things I do, but so that's why I call it a talent or an art, because it's not everybody can see that what you've just asked for is actually, if we model it like this, then we can not only do what you asked for, but we can do anything. The trigger service might be a good example where they said, anytime we want to be able to describe a transaction parametrically, that whenever that transaction is observed, we want to be able to send a notification, and then I say, okay, I got it. But instead of just like, you can do this, send a notification, what if instead the way you'll do that is you'll raise an event, and then what if we have this other service that can monitor events, and whenever it sees any kind of event, then you can tell it whatever you want to, send a notification or an email. And if we did it that way, then not only could we do what you've asked for, but a customer could like raise an event, like there's a bad weather pattern that's coming in. So like, we don't even have to be knowledgeable about weather. We're not going to be the experts in everything, but what if we model it that way, then we can. So I think you understand the art of seeing the specific problem and generalizing, and I think that is one of the most important aspects of really being to distinguish yourself as an architect.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've just always had that, and I would just have to chalk it up to imagination. Like, the funnest thing is to just dream up something that is beyond what anybody is thinking about and blowing their mind. Who wouldn't love, to do that? And so part of it's just selfish, because I like the accolades of, like, I've never worked with anybody like you before, and so how do you keep impressing them, and this is, I guess these motives are not pure, but yeah, I like people to think that I'm awesome, and the way I do that is by trying to do things that they've never seen before, and to over deliver. And I tell my kids, like, you always give your employer more than they bargained for, and I've never not, I've never given my employer only what they bargained for. And so that's, I guess just part of what drives me as well.
Yeah, well, you are quite different from a lot of engineers and a lot of leaders, in the idea that you do spend a lot of time being creative, which I think is not something that most developers do. I think most developers like to have lines. They like to have lines drawn in the sand. They like to have the box, they can understand the box so they can build it. But you're not that type of thinker. You're more of a divergent thinker, a creative personality. I think, the first thing you talked about was the different horses for different courses. And I think it's just that's the type of horse you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like, right. So IBM used to call them wild ducks, and there was something about these wild ducks that were just like pooping all over the grass, and they kept trying to get them, cleared off, and then pretty soon there weren't any more wild ducks, and I don't know, insects came back. I don't know what the moral story. I have to go back and look at that story. But the moral was cherish your wild ducks, and there's not that many of them. And so right, so I'm like, okay, I'm not perfect. I don't have a good I don't have a good culture of writing unit tests, but I can think up things that don't exist, and I can lead and I can inspire, and I think I am a positive, have a I have like a positive outlook of like whatever it is, like there's nothing we can't do. It's software. Our medium is unlimited. So like whatever the problem is, there's a solution for it. And it's just a matter of, a lot of times people, you say, well, we're going to go to California. And one class of person is like, but there's a huge river, and there's a mountain range. There's multiple mountain ranges, and there's one part that's a huge, so like they're just immediately focused on all the reasons why, like there's no way. And the other person's like, no, we are going to California. That part is not a debate. We're going there. So let's figure out how we're going to do it. How, like, yes, but so it's just a completely different way of thinking. It's the same goal. Yeah, so a different horse, like, but accept me, cherish the horses that you have, and recognize their strengths and help them with their weaknesses, but anyway, there's developers don't like to be told what to do, and that's just something that you have everywhere. And I have to walk that line because I'm usually at least for the last 20 years in a leadership position. So if I come in, if usually I'm gonna come to a company because they need leadership, right? So there's something, anybody can join a company and maintain the status quo. So by definition, leadership means leading and changing. And there'll be some people that get behind you and other people that fight you every step of the way. And it just depends on, those dynamics as to like how you have to walk that line. But that's, and I believe that the biggest failure of a leader is when they don't care what you think, and you're disenfranchised because that leader is like, well, this is the way we're doing it, and it's my way or the highway, and I think, and I was asked this at Chorus when I joined, they're like, what do you think is the most important characteristic or trait of an architect? And I was like, keeping an open mind and being okay, like being able to let it go for things that just don't matter. So I would see this at Uptake, and it was kind of weird, but but I was supposed to be the chief application architect, and I told Greg, said, let's just call it the chief architect, a chief platform architect. So anyway, so I was in a position of authority and some degree of power, I guess. I mean, I certainly didn't ask too much permission, but teams would come to me like, we want to do this, and they were very passionate about doing it that way, and it'd be kind of not the way I would do it, but ultimately they need to own that. Well, not need to, like they are going to own it. They own it, and they've got to live with it. So I would bring my experience, but I'm not an expert. I'm not going to be living with that thing day in and day out. Like, so I'd say, well, these are my concerns. And, I do want you to take a hard look at whatever that I'm saying that I think is better, and maybe come back with like, that take some time to evaluate it. But at the end of the day, you guys own this. And if that's the direction you want to go, then I will support you. And not every leader can do that. And I guess you can't let go of everything. There's certain things that are important. Like we're not going to deploy, different clouds. Hold on just a sec. I might have to take this.
Yeah, no worries.
Actually, trying to close on a house that we're purchasing in Virginia between today and tomorrow, and I'm waiting on numbers and phone calls. So
yeah, let me stop you from getting your house.
Yeah, that was just some spam. So yeah, anyway, I guess you just need to, there's certain things that are important, and you have to put your foot down and be like, well, this is what we're doing. No, you're not going to go develop that new service and go, because we've decided that everybody's doing Scala. Like it or not, that's the decision that's been made. This is the investment we've already made. These are the people we've already hired. So that's what we're doing. And then you have situations like, then I found out later, like, this team went off and rewrote that in Java. Now, I love Java, but like, that was sneaky. That actually happened. So anyway.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a good feeling when you're being micromanaged. And I think that some people think that that's what leadership means by directing and telling everyone what to do. And that's a really good way to pit people against you. And also just get poor quality work, because I think from a junior perspective, I'm looking to be told what to do, or at least why what I'm doing matters. I think it's probably actually more important why what I'm doing matters. You seem to be the source of the why as you pass it down to the people that you're leading. Where does that come from? Is that just experience? Like how do you always have an answer?
Oh man.
Yeah.
I think it starts with I just have this super sensitivity that every hour of every day I'm trying to use it as best I can, and that there's a point to what I'm doing. So I feel like I'm a steward of time, and the company is paying me to spend my time wisely. And I have there's a deep down something about how I'm wired deep down that recoils against futility. And I have these anecdotes. I'll share two of them. One is in high school, I heard that you could get some extra money by making these phone calls for the Fraternal Order of Police to drum up some donations. And they gave us, they ripped sheets out of a phone book, and just like that was like go down. And I did that for like 3 hours this one night. I never went back, didn't even want my paycheck. Like like just doing this call over, like I couldn't do it. And later on, as I was at NSA, to get some extra money, I saw a job as a janitor right near where I live. So it's like, oh, it's an office building. Like after hours, just go through, vacuum and whatever. And I did that, and it's fine. Did it on Tuesday. It's like, okay. Wednesday, it's like, man, it's the same office. Thursday, I'm like, my mind's like, I can't vacuum the same room over and over and over. And I just had, and that actually.
So wait, hang on. So you were working at the NSA doing what? What was your job?
Well, I can't say. It was a secret. But it wasn't anything that would be interesting. I was just, programming in C, and some other stuff.
But yeah, you're a programmer, so you don't need, it's not like you need to work an extra job as a janitor, but you picked up a janitorial job on the side?
Yeah, because and then I worked at Radio Shack, just because it's like, okay, I'm up here in Maryland by myself and I'm working, you can only work 8.5 hours a day. They don't let you work, because it's a government. So it's like, what am I going to do with my time? Play video games? So, and, when you're young, you always need money. But I was just a co-op student, so but yeah, that's what I did. But it's this aversion to futility that's so deep down inside, that makes me a good engineer, because if I do the same thing twice in code or whatever, I can't handle it. It's like, no, I'm going to build a framework so that I don't have to do this ever again. I'm just press the button, or I'm going to write the one line of code instead of the 100. So it's hard to answer your question, but I think it's rooted in that this keen sensitivity to, like, I'm, every day and every moment, I'm constantly thinking, like, is this futile, or is this important? Why am I, is this really what I should be working on today? And if I don't know, like, what to work on, then I'm like, I don't know what to do, because I mean, yeah, I can think of things to do, but they don't seem to, like, they're pointless. Like, I could do that today and it wouldn't make any difference. So knowing, like, why I'm doing what I'm doing at all times, and what we're going to do next, and why, and how that leads into the next thing, I guess is how I'm always have the answer as to, this is why we're doing it in this order, and this is what we're going to do next, and we have to crawl, and then we're going to walk, and then we're going to run, and hopefully we'll still be in business by the time we get there. But it also feeds into making a difference, and it's the exact same thing we've just been talking about. I was actually talking to my wife about this last night. If I don't feel like I'm making a difference, I can't handle that. And like, I don't think, and that was kind of getting there at IBM, and that's when I joined Uptake. It was like a lifeline, and so it's just important to me that my existence or my employment at a company makes a difference. And I've never worked anywhere where I didn't make a difference. And if I ever find myself where it wouldn't matter if I'm here or not, like, in making a difference, it's not just like, okay, yeah, I wrote some. I'm not talking about, like, he can write some code. I'm talking about, like, because you can hire somebody to come in and write some code, and to just, like, hey, we've got a new feature, we need just do it, follow the same recipes that we already have in place, and that's not making a difference. That's just, like, just keeping on with, I'm talking about, like, man, it's before Mike and after Mike, and it's just night and day. He really transformed, whether it was the culture or the architecture, whether it's the performance, our velocity. We can, like, that's what I live for. And and I was struggling with that recently here, but it's like, I'm only 2 months in, really, and trying to just find, and that, to be totally honest, the first day at Uptake, it was either, I think it was the first day, it could have been the second day. I left the building, walked outside, and called my wife and cried.
Wow.
Because I was so overwhelmed. Everything was new. Everybody was young. Everybody was way smarter than me. And I did not know what the hell I was doing there. And I thought, I'm just here because Ganesh knows me, and Ganesh has fond memories of us being young 20-somethings in a startup together. And I was just overwhelmed, and just like, I don't know what I have to add here, and I don't know what I'm going to do here. And I had some good conversations with Greg, who assured me, like, you're not here. The incumbents usually have a better perspective than you do. You're brand new, and you're like, the incumbent, Greg Goff and other, would be like, Mike, we're trying to build a platform. Nobody here has ever built one of those. We have no idea what we're doing, and you do, and that helped me. And then I can remember, like, 3 months later, I'm like, okay, I know what the first thing is I'm going to attack, and it's something it's in my wheelhouse, and it took me some time to figure it out. It was that application service. It's like, okay, that's something I know, and I'm just going to sink my teeth into that. And then that led to the next microservice and the next and the next and the next. But anyway, yeah. I don't remember where I was going with that.
Well, I'm glad that you are willing to share the defeats, because I think that in any organization, Uptake wasn't really corporate, but it was certainly bigger than a startup, in that you don't know everybody personally. There are people that are unwilling to say their true feelings. They put up kind of like a facade of what they're supposed to say. And that's something that I learned. Uptake was my first job. I think I came in with kind of, I just didn't know. I didn't know. So everyone I talked to, I wanted to impress them and say, hey, look, I'm this young kid. Like, let me work. Let me try and work. But I appreciate that you, even if it's goes against the grain of what other people say, or if it potentially makes you look weak, right? Like saying, I don't know what I'm doing, or this is hard and it's challenging me, that you are at least able to be honest about that. So that's something that I wish everybody could do. And I try to do that, even though it's a struggle, to just be a little more personal and honest when you talk to people, because I think that it helps just clear away some of the roadblocks. When you're not talking to someone, you're just talking to whatever facade they're trying to show you. Maybe they're trying to prove that they belong there, or they should get the next promotion, or whatever it is. So how's it going at Chorus? What are you building over there?
Conversation intelligence. It's a great space. It's really, like, when I saw it, it's like, why didn't somebody think of this earlier? Well, they did. I just didn't know, but, you're recording this conversation right now. That's what we do. We will dial into your call with a bot. That's a scripted bot that's literally going to, like, launch a virtual Windows machine and launch a browser and click around and dial into your call based on the fact that we're syncing with your calendar. We can see your meetings. We can read the details, just like you open the calendar and you got the Zoom invite and there's a link right there. We can do this. So we're syncing that. So we know what meetings you have and which ones you want us to dial into. And we will dial into the call and record the transcript. And then we'll have the whole video. It'll be brought into our portal. And so it's kind of oriented towards salespeople. So you're working this deal and you've had 10 calls with this customer. So you can go in one place and see all 10 calls. Not only you, but your boss, your manager, your colleagues that couldn't join that call. It's like, what did he say? He said, what? How did was he joking? What did he, you can, like, review the call. We've got the transcript, and then we're going to look for key phrases and like how many times did he say COVID? Like, is that, but anyway, so it's a fascinating space to be in this, in the year 2020. We actually just closed our C round today. So there's 50 million that we just had invested, or 45, I can't remember. So it's a hot space to be in, so that's good. It's Python. So guess what? I've learned Python. I've learned to appreciate. It's like horses and courses. By the time I left Uptake, I could appreciate the beauty of the Scala language and how consistent it was. Java is still my first love, but I appreciate Scala, and I think I became proficient. I can appreciate Python for what it is. There's still things like I think it works against itself. Some things can be very obscure, but hey, one thing, and we're running out of time, but I always thought that I had like a destiny that was to be just like everybody else. That my destiny was like, well, I'm going to become a manager, or I'm going to become a grumpy old person, and I'm going to stop learning. And this is what I learned in the first 10 years of my career. And then I had this fear that I would I would stop learning and I would stop growing. And that's like has never happened. And I've never become a manager. So don't think that your career trajectory is like the cast. Like you can, like they say, nobody's going to look out for your career but you, and nobody really cares. And you can make it what you want. And so like I'm pleased that my fears did not come true, that I can say at the age of 49 that that this year I am better than I was last year. And last year I could say with all truth and sincerity, I was better. And I always thought that I'd look back, and I'll tell you this, that I felt like if I ever look back and think that I'm not better than I was last year, that'll be kind of a failure. And I don't know if that's the sign like I need to, find a new career or something, but it's not happened yet. I'd never heard the term microservice until like 2017 or 2016 to 2017, right? And I'd never heard of Git until 2016 or something. And I was at IBM, and it kind of like I got indoctrinated. I'd never worked with a NoSQL database like Mongo. And all this stuff was it exposed to me over like a 2 to 3 year standpoint time frame. And then in 2018, I got a phone call to come join Chorus, and I landed on the feet. I was indoctrinated in microservices, RESTful APIs, Swagger, Open API, Kafka. I'd never used until at IBM, Mongo, document-oriented NoSQL. It's like it all just in Git. You'd be like an idiot if you don't know what a pull request is, and that would have been me. Just like in 2016, never heard of a pull request, and so then, but I'd never built a microservice architecture. I was exposed to the concepts and had become convinced, like, okay, that's the way you do things now. Never really built one. I just did monoliths, and so Uptake is like, yeah, full steam ahead, man. Kafka and microservices. Oh, let's throw in a little Scala to boot. And now guess what I'm doing here at Chorus? I'm leading the revolution to a microservice architecture. Because what they have right now is like what Mike Gorman would have built in 2016. So it's great. There's still lots for me to learn here, but you want to match. You want a place where you have something they don't have, and that they've got something that you can take away from that. And so anyway, so that's what's going on at Chorus, and let's do this like once a year, and I'll let you know how it went.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to be mindful of your time. So you have a hard stop at noon.
Yeah.
Or whatever time it is over there. I'm Pacific. I actually moved over to San Francisco a few weeks back.
Okay. Well, that's where Chorus is based out of.
Well then, if COVID's over, I would ask for a tour next time you're around here then.
Yeah, well, I've never been to their office. I still live here in South Carolina. I'll be in Virginia in a couple of weeks, and the rest of the Chorus team is in Tel Aviv. So that's so interesting. I've never worked with any team in Israel. So that's a whole
I still want to touch on what you last ended with. And I think that to hear you talk about your career trajectory and how you used to feel like there was maybe just a path, you become a manager, you come the next step, and that's what dictates your life. I think it's refreshing, and a lot of people need to hear from people like you, where wherever we drop Mike Gorman, whether that's like a chief architect, platform architect, or even just developer, you're going to be you. You're going to find the purpose, what you're bringing to the table that they need, and you're going to execute on that. So one of the reasons that I wanted to start talking with people is that there's absolutely been times in my career recently where I just wake up and I go, what the hell am I doing? Like, why am I writing code? And I think part of it is there's kind of like a weight that gets put on you when you accept your role, when you say, this is who I am and this is what I've been defined on paper. And especially also if you have people around you that tell you, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, do this. So yeah, every time I talk with you, I enter the vortex of Mike Gorman's analogies, the freaking vortex that just beams out of your head. But it's really refreshing, and I think that there's a lot of people that could use a little bit of dousing of that, just to say, hey, there's another way. You can view yourself and your role a different way.
Well, that's very kind. I used to always also say to my children or whoever, nobody knows what you can do that will be the most impactful and the most helpful than you. Your boss does not know how to use you. Your boss is just trying to hold on himself, So I'd really like, my boss doesn't know what I should be working on or how best to use me. I know that. I know what I know, and I don't know how great example of this is, but my first co-op job before NSA was at Milliken. Okay, Milliken doesn't exist anymore. It's like a textile mill. It was on its last, few years before there was no more textiles in America. And I'll take anything, because my grades were just like, every semester I broke the record for doing worse than I'd ever done before for 4 straight semesters. And I'm like, okay, time out. Something's got to change. And that's a whole other story. But I ended up as a co-op student at Milliken in the small, in the woods mill, a textile mill that has motors and a boiler. And I'm a computer engineer. And I had to figure out, I had to make up what I was going to do, And so I wrote a program for them to track their motors and the history of the motors. And because they're like, well, we got this old computer in the corner and we got something called DBase4. I'm like, all right, let me at it. They didn't know what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with me, but there was no way they were going to, figure that part out. And so hey, how about this? And so that's a recurring theme as well. You are the person that knows best how you can help the best, and what you can do. So yeah, don't let your boss define you. Don't let your diploma define you. You can let your clothes define you. All right, I better run.
All right, man.
Brian, I really enjoyed talking to you, especially because we talked about me, and that's my favorite topic. So I really appreciate it.
Interview me sometime.
I will. All right, take care.
All right, see ya.